Good morning. I'm Patrick Hugg, an Elvis colleague and a professor emeritus at Loyola University College of Law in New Orleans, Louisiana, in the United States. My comments today for this video journal are entitled Meteoric Change and Uncertainty, Our Dark 2020. First, Elvis colleagues have been asked to address the changes to our academic disciplines and pedagogy since the onslaught of the coronavirus pandemic. Already in mid-July 2020, we see more than 13 million people infected worldwide. Our general topic is cast as the impact of COVID-19 in law or the pedagogic effect of COVID-19 in law teaching. As we witness evolving events now in mid-July of 2020, we may be aghast at global developments as well as our circumstances for the coming academic year. We unfortunately discover, of course, that the sinister COVID virus has not been a solo traveler. Defying most of our life experiences, this pandemic has been accompanied by and magnified by concurrent developments that may well revolutionize much in our lives in the near and far future. This sounds like exaggerated fiction, but it is not. On top of the still growing medical pandemic, we face its economic consequences as global business retraction exceeds that in the 2008 financial crisis. We see massive unemployment and business shutdowns that are yet to show us their full force, thanks to immense government spending as governments run historic deficits while take in less revenue due to fewer taxes because of declining economic activity. It's a terrible formula. This becomes all the more threatening as some governments respond first to this, seeking only their political gain. Made worse because several leading governments seem harnessed to the harsh rise of populism, confrontational nationalism, while a few others simply become more authoritarian. As last week's economist phrased it, quote, a new chauvinist right that has no regard for rules, truth, or institutions, close quote, has arisen. From Trump to Xi, Putin, Erdogan, Bolsonaro, and even in some EU countries. We see Duda's recent victory in Poland as an example. All of these leaders pushing and shoving their way around domestic and international arenas to strengthen their own power. From repression in Hong Kong to poisoning the free international internet, freedoms are in question. Democracy as a concept of government is challenged. So uncertainty is our new watchword. For my subject, international trade, it could hardly be worse. As we all know, uncertainty is toxic to business, toxic to banking, manufacturing, supply chains, shipping, and so forth. This week, two thoughtful global leaders, Angela Merkel and Christine Lagarde, both commented that uncertainty faces us from multiple directions. The coronavirus has closed schools, businesses, and killed 500,000 humans worldwide. It has shuttered our sacred football stadiums, and of course worse, it has walled in our elderly in convalescent and nursing homes. People of every sort, of every walk of life, are experiencing disequilibrium and fear. These are times for great care and caution. Finally, equally unforeseen, in the midst of this turmoil, a phenomenon has arisen in the form of the social justice movements, prompting unprecedented reforms in the U.S. and elsewhere, as well as a fair amount of uncomfortable dialogue about equality. The Black Lives Matter banner has been widely raised to promote equal opportunity, fair housing, police reform, and support for all forms of minorities. Many laws and commercial standards in the United States have been swiftly changed, even football teams' names, in a significant array of social reform. Where that ends and what effects it will have on our pedagogy is unclear. So since March 2020, when we were all sent home, we have witnessed unpredicted change with no certain future. Addressing the first topic proposed by my ELPIS colleagues, the effects of COVID in my law school teaching, these are easy to describe, but they're more challenging to manage and turn beneficially into effective learning for my students. I'm scheduled next month to go into a classroom in the law school building and teach my usual course regarding international trade. The problem is it won't be the usual course on international trade because it will be simultaneously taught virtually to students who choose to stay at home or watch the course or participate in the course somewhere else via Zoom. Because of this, we know that the traditional lecture method is not sufficient. People sitting watching their computer at home. So I read the literature, and there's plenty of it about how to teach effectively with virtual resources, and I am intimidated. I have a lot to learn. I confess pointedly, and with a little fear, the realization that switching to this format will be difficult and present new dimensions in pedagogy that I have not learned before. I see that this is a new world and cannot be done effectively by simply recording traditional lectures. Now, I've always worked hard on my lectures, trying to make them lively, first by using a friendly Socratic dialogue, but more than that, also using experiential learning activities that force students into action, such as requiring team reporting on topics and active debates on current issues in class. But now with Zoom, and some students not even in the room, the teaching dynamics change. To engage students via Zoom, various more active strategies must be employed. So I'm learning exotic techniques such as how to use breakout chat rooms and online quizzes and project-oriented working groups with flipped formats. You may recall the 2 sessions we had in Hanover on flipped formats. Pretty interesting that now we have to do it. These need to be designed for each course, so we academics have to go to work and design them for each individual course. In my instance, in international trade, I can't simply go online and find some resource. I have to do it all myself. So we face a lot of work and a lot of experimentation, and hopefully it will pay off. The coming semester will be a challenge. 3, as to my doctrinal subject, international trade, again, uncertain change dominates the day. We have seen a denouement in the ascent of global trade, and now the arc of the narrative descends because high-speed globalization is in decline. Harmony is not in the air. The global trading order is out of order. For years, centered around the World Trade Organization and the many multinational and regional trading agreements, trading regimes today are in disarray and in some ways dysfunctional. Some governments are not even pretending to cooperate, some doing all they can to deny the global system's principles to their advantage. Again, populist confrontational nationalistic politics plays its role, disrupting the usual global order, leaving instability all around. It is unclear. Today, it's unclear when and where the next tariff, tax, or trade rule revision will appear. It's not even clear when each of us can travel to the next country to participate in international exchanges. Perhaps most serious in this uncertainty are, of course, the 2 trade behemoths, China and the United States. Some say they are facing a breaking point in dialogue, relations more tense than ever before in the modern era. Trump and Xi are unique people, and they are forceful people. They are playing, in my view, a dangerous poker game in which each may be overbidding his hand. The latest news reports mention fresh sanctions and threats today, even from both sides. The United States restricting more Chinese students coming, Secretary of State Pompeo arguing about the South China Sea. Um, we don't know what's going to happen next. China is less and less restrained by the less and less united West, and thus China becomes stronger and bolder politically, economically, and militarily. Hong Kong's total takeover represents a move reminiscent of the worst subversions in modern history for those history buffs. And the U.S. has made matters worse. In the last 3 years, U.S. trade hawks have stimulated the fight, not just with China, but also with most of the U.S.'s trading partners, weakening everybody involved, again, strengthening China, giving it a free hand to assert itself globally, which it's doing. So today we see little effective global leadership. Trump wants to undermine the World Health Organization, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the WTO, just for starters. Just 4 days ago, Trump announced a fresh 25% tariff on $1.3 billion worth of French handbags, cosmetics, and soaps in retaliation for the digital services tax that France wants to impose. This is in addition to another $2.4 billion tax that's in the U.S. regulatory pipeline on similar goods from other countries in Europe who are considering their own digital services tax. By the time of the November election, no one knows what Trump will do to woo his hardcore base of voters. The global instability is compounded by similar hostilities among the EU, Britain, India, Brazil, Iran, as other political leaders follow in the same mold, competing for votes by blaming everything on everybody else. Then, for two of the world's traditional partners and allies, we see the EU and the US fighting in a form that is just senseless. And of course, again, strengthens the hand of other competitors globally. We see the frailty of liberal democracies poignantly contrasted by the rising power of autocratic states. More uncertainty. 4, and finally, the narrative for teaching trade courses has now evolved. The age of ever-increasing high-speed globalization is over, at least for the foreseeable future. We expect more protectionism, higher costs, supply chain disruption, less efficiency in the production of goods and services worldwide. Surely this is a recipe for deeper conflict, less economic efficiency, and growth. So the narrative for our courses on international trade has changed. We used to teach the happy story from the 13th century Venetian Marco Polo, bringing the pleasures and profits of the ancient Silk Road to Europe, evolving 2 centuries later to the mixed age of discovery and exploration as the Europeans took over the world in many ways, dramatically developing international trade, making massive profits, while at the same time creating a lot of problems. We saw and we teach about the odious mercantilism leading to nationalistic competition and war after war after war. The story changed a bit in 1817 with what we call the modern theory of David Ricardo, articulating his compelling numbers of trading for comparative advantages. We learned that we all benefit when we trade. And over the ensuing century, trade escalated until the world descended into the modern 30 Years' War, of course, 1914 on. These two wars and the depression in between yielded such devastating results that most of the world eagerly came to the altar of global cooperation at Bretton Woods in San Francisco in 1945 to found the United Nations, a stable international monetary system, the World Bank, and the GATT in 1947, and a changed world ensued, all for the better. From 1948 to 1994, the GATT provided the rules for much of world trade and presided over periods that saw some of the highest growth in international commerce. Successive rounds of multilateral trade negotiations followed, lowering barriers and increasing international trade. The narrative is pretty happy. Then the glorious 1995 incubation of the World Trade Organization, the biggest reform of international trade in half a century. We see services and intellectual property now in the system, and a reasonably effective dispute settlement process put in place. More growth years followed. China agreed to some market reforms and it was admitted to the WTO in 2001. Russia followed in 2012. Today we see a WTO of 164 members. But then the arc began to change. The Doha Development Round was launched also in 2001 with the purpose of assisting developing nations participate in the success story and the economic growth of expanding international trade. But things didn't go so well. The developed countries like the United States, the EU, Japan, clung to their rules, especially their agricultural protectionism, while the developing countries, led by powerful countries such as India, China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa, insisted that the protectionism be reduced and that they be given greater market access. Meanwhile, they were clinging to their special status as developing nations, regardless of how successful they had become as traders. So impasse occurred in 2008, and it largely remains. Then in 2016, Trump was elected and began a full-on assault on the trading world and the WTO. His victims reacted predictably, and we get trade wars left and right. The U.S. has effectively unplugged the WTO dispute settlement system, rendering it powerless. So today, little is happening in Geneva, and we know the Director General has resigned because of the state of affairs. So today, the trade story has a different leitmotif of populist protectionism, and in the end, uncertainty. And uncertainty, again, is toxic to trade and toxic to economic growth. So today we teach a course with an unhappy ending so far. Thank you.